Welcome to the Florida Divorce Podcast, your source for the information you need to successfully get through your divorce and into the next exciting chapter of life. Now, here's your host, Attorney Scott Kalish.
Hey everyone, this is Attorney Scott Kalish. I am a divorce and family lawyer here in South Florida. Today, I want to go over an interesting aspect of child support and alimony. I want to talk about specifically how and whether overtime, bonuses, commissions, how they play into the overall calculation of child support and potentially alimony, whether or not that income that you could receive from a bonus, commissions, or overtime can be calculated into the child support or alimony amount, okay? So this is something that gets asked, quite a bit. I have first responders, police, firefighters asking about overtime and whether that gets counted into child support and alimony. I have salespeople worried about commissions and bonuses. So this is something that really spans across, several job areas. And it's something that's pretty well defined in our law. And it's pretty clear. It's pretty common sense. And I think you'll find the same once I explain it. So let's start off with bonus income, right? So let's say a husband or wife is in a sales job, and depending upon their numbers, at the end of the year, they could receive a bonus. And we're working with a manager of a company, and part of their salary or an incentive is tied to the overall success of the company at the end of the year, right? And if the company does great, they get a bonus. So for bonuses, a bonus can be included into the child support calculation, right, into someone's income or alimony, right, once the bonus is considered regular and continuous, right? So it's got to be something that historically has been there and can reasonably be counted on to occur like this year, right, the current year, the year that you're actually in the divorce case. If it was something that husband or wife received, 5 years ago and it was a one-time thing and there's like speculation that it could happen this year without any real evidence, I think the argument is incredibly weak, right, to include it for child support. But if it's something that they've gotten each and every year for the last 5 years and there's evidence to suggest that they're on track to hit their bonus, this coming year, then the argument's very good to include it into income, right? Something that you should keep in mind is that obviously with a bonus, and if it's tied to like a company's success for the year, it can vary, right? It can go up and down. And if, let's say, the bonus for a particular case was particularly high last year, but historically it was around the same amount in the past and it wasn't as high as last year, then I think the argument is very strong that the bonus to be used, right, for purposes of income, it should be the one that the person historically received rather than the extra high one they received last year. If the evidence suggests, right, if people from the company, come in and testify that, hey, we anticipate a bonus on track with previous years rather than the high year. So that depends, right? So the overall answer to this question really depends on what the evidence shows, what can be expected for the current year, and what's expected potentially for the future, right? So I think that's also relevant to this question. Let's flip to overtime, right? So this is a question I get a lot with police officers and firefighters. For them, overtime is something that can be worked pretty frequently. One of my sisters is a police officer, right? She's a detective with the local police agency here in Palm Beach County. And for her, for overtime, right, she can pretty much work overtime whenever she wants. So it's something that really is at the discretion, I think, of the police officer. But, in her case, right, but there's nothing saying that she's forced to do overtime. But overtime will be included if it has been continuous, right? And overtime has regularly been worked in the past. But there's nothing required. There's nothing requiring the person to go out and do overtime. There's a case that I just want to highlight quickly for you. This is a case that is pretty old, right? Back in the 90s, when Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida, this case discussed whether or not mandatory overtime due to Hurricane Andrew was properly used as income, right? Considered as income for the husband, right? So in this particular case that I'm reading, and I think it's definitely, instructive, right? It says that because the mandatory overtime in that case was short-lived and temporary, it should not be used for child support purposes. So if overtime was like a one-time thing and it was only for a limited period of time and it was mandatory, then it's probably not going to be used for income purposes. If, however, a husband or wife regularly worked overtime for years and months leading up to the divorce, and all of a sudden they just stopped, and there's evidence to suggest, and there's no real reason for it stopping, then, the evidence would suggest that, hey, yeah, it should be used. But if it was a one-time thing, temporary, and it was mandatory, then I think the argument's very weak. And I think the case law, right, the law in Florida is against using it for income purposes. So there you go. And commissions, obviously, I didn't hit commissions, but commissions is pretty straightforward. They're going to take an average of your commissions and use that as your income. And I think the central theme to this is that the court is going to use whatever the evidence suggests, right? So if the evidence suggests that the bonus is going to be received, or the commission is going to be received, at a certain level, or the overtime is going to be worked at a certain level, then it's going to be used. If it was a limited thing, a one-time thing, a bonus that was just because the owner of the company, felt generous and it never happened in the last 10 years, then it's not going to be used. So just think about it that way. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And the law is very clear. Some people have different understanding, right, of it, just based on, I guess, what people talk to each other about. But the law in Florida is pretty clear that yes, it can be used. Sometimes I hear mixed things of what people think that can happen with their bonus or their overtime or their commissions. So I just wanted to clarify this topic in this podcast episode. So if you like this podcast, right, if you find it useful, find it valuable, please give it a 5-star review wherever you're listening. And if you have a question for me, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions that you have. From time to time, people definitely email from the podcast. My email is scott@kjlawfla.com. Again, scott@kjlawfla.com. And if you'd like to get started, right, if you're listening to this and you want to get your divorce or possibly paternity case started, give us a call. I'd be happy to speak with you. Our number is 561-208-1859, or you can email me at that email. Again, it's scott@kjlawfla.com. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Florida Divorce Podcast. To learn the 10 secrets behind every successful divorce, visit floridadivorcepodcast.com. If you'd like Scott's help in your divorce case, go to kjlawfla.com.